Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Business of Inner Peace. I am super excited because we have a fabulous guest with us today. Her name is Holli Howard, and she's the founder of Positive Living Coaching, and she helps women heal from hidden impacts of childhood trauma and reclaim their self-worth and empowerment. And with extensive trauma-informed training, a background as a certified child welfare specialist, certification as a trauma-informed healing and resilience practitioner, and her own lived experience of healing, Holli offers a compassionate, practical approach to quiet the inner critic, rewrite limiting beliefs, and step into the life you deserve. So grab your favorite beverage and stay tuned for an amazing conversation. Welcome to the Business of Inner Peace. I'm your host, Erin Jean, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's pretend we're sitting in my living room enjoying a cup of coffee or tea and getting to know each other just a little better. That's what I love. I love getting to hear your story. I love feeling connected by the spirit of understanding that our stories bring. Today, I'm sharing some of my story, but I hope someday soon you'll be telling me yours. Listen, I know that you're feeling overwhelmed with life, and nothing is exactly how you'd like it to be. Your marriage is not what you hoped for, motherhood is harder than you imagined, and you've lost yourself somewhere in the mix of responsibilities. Well, if you're ready to bring some more peace and joy into your life, reconnect with God who made you, and start living a life you love, then grab your cup of coffee or tea and let's dive into today's show. Welcome, Holli. Thanks so much for being with me on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yay, me too. Well, I say it every episode. I really, really love stories, and I think there's so much that we can learn from each other, and it's the fastest way to connect. So I would love to hear just about your story of what got you to this place where you are helping women in this way.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, stories can be so powerful. It's interesting because when people do ask about my story, sometimes it's hard to really pinpoint, all right, where do I start? Because I have so many little bits of pieces that kind of got me here. My main thing that did happen when I was younger, I did experience childhood trauma. I often say because I truly have one of the I call her the best mom on the planet. I know some people might challenge that, but I truly feel like I have the best mom on the planet. Very loving, very supportive, very, unconditional, and I'm so grateful for the life I had with her. Um, and in my childhood, I had a couple of what I call big traumas. The big traumas that I kind of define that as is anything on the ACEs questionnaire, which if anyone in the audience doesn't know it, it's the adverse childhood experiences. And there's 10 different questions that they have just to see if you experienced those and you get, a score based on those experiences. So I had a few of those. It could have been much worse. So I'm very grateful for that. And again, I had that supportive mom. But then as I got into my 20s, because I did repress the things that happened. But when I got into my 20s and I really started my healing journey, I was 23, I realized how lucky I was to have that mom that loved me throughout it. And not everyone is as blessed to have that. And they go through not only the traumas that I went through, but they go through it on a greater scale, maybe more frequent or whatnot. Um, so my story with what had happened, I actually didn't remember. I totally repressed it. And at 23, I was having a phone conversation with a friend of mine. It was a phone conversation. I still emphasize that because I think in order to kind of really heal and really kind of get in touch with things, we have to be in a safe space. And I feel like I probably felt so unsafe in so many moments, and some people had kind of directed stuff at me, sometimes pointing out maybe some idiosyncrasies that I had that, I stiffened up at times and just different things that happened. Um, when this friend said something to me, he wasn't talking about me, and we were on a phone call. We were not in person. And what he said is, again, I don't even remember the topic, but what he said was, things happen to people and they get over it. Well, unless it happens in childhood, then it's a little bit harder to get over. And as soon as he said that, my I just kind of had this moment of, wow, that did happen and it did impact me. I told him, hey, I got to call you back. I hung up the phone and started processing these memories. And what I realized is I actually had always remembered it. This repressed memory was something that I had thought about multiple times. And I even remembered having some conversations. Oh, I better not share that with that person because they wouldn't understand. But then it was shoved back down. So it was repressed and I didn't connect with it until finally that moment was able to open it up for me and again in a safe spot. And then I said, wow, that did happen to me and it did impact me and it's still impacting me. And that was the start of me. I did take a couple months. I was in November. I said in January, I'm going to focus on dealing with that. And that started my healing journey.
Wow. Isn't that like what strikes me about that is how powerful just things we say and the presence that we carry can be. Because I'm sure I'm like, does your friend even know what that?
What's interesting is so I'm writing a book.
Okay.
And in the book, I'm actually putting out some of those stories. And I thought about it. I'm like, I don't know if he knows.
Mm.
I know I shared some stuff with it, but that was the very start of my healing journey. I was 23. I'm now in my 50s. And so having everything else that's come from that, I know he doesn't know. And so I've actually thanked him in the book. He's going to be in the acknowledgments. I have a couple other people that I'm thinking that I'm trying to add into that healing journey because I think there are some people that know, but I think that even the people that know probably don't know how much it's impacted me and how much I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're going to find out soon enough.
I just love that because, it's like don't ever underestimate even just a smile or the warmth or your presence of being. Because when you hear people's stories, there's often a person that was like that. And when you break down what they actually said or what they actually did, it doesn't really seem like a big deal. But it is the thing that impacted someone on taking a step forward in their journey. So, that's really what stood out to me. I was like, wow, that's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. And it really does. I always say, everyone has their own circumstances and reasons why. So when people are doing something, instead of being critical ever, it's curiosity and understanding. And yeah, you never know whose life you're going to impact by those conversations.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
I'm curious to know on this healing path that you took, what do you feel like ended up being one of the most helpful tools for you around trauma that you just really were like, this is the thing that has helped so, so much?
Yeah. I have a couple different thoughts with it because one of the things in my program, I'm not a therapist, so I definitely want people to process, the stuff that they need to process. I want them to process with a licensed professional. Um, in my program, I want people to have done some of that work where they're not going to be triggered. We can handle some triggers, but I really want them to have processed things. And with um, my we can talk about this later, but with two of my focuses of awareness and impact, I talk about that in my program, but it's not the main focus. It's enough to just identify things that happened. But at the same time, when that happened to me, back in that November when I was 23, I couldn't say the words.
Mm.
I thought about it. It came over me. Again, I kind of made that decision. Okay, New Year's Eve, I'm going to start to focus on it. I told one of my friends prior to that time frame, but I didn't tell her. I circled around it and made her come out and say it for me because I couldn't say the words. And then she and I were together for New Year's Eve with a third friend. And he said, okay, so what's everyone's New Year's resolution? And I had her tell him because I couldn't say it.
Mhm.
So one of the most powerful things, and then I did do some therapy in those early months of when I was still 23. But in the January through March timeframe, I think I did quite a bit of therapy and I was able to say it. So being able to say it without having it consume me, I think so much before it was powerful inside of me. So I was having all of these subconscious tendencies that I just wasn't even aware that I was doing. And so being able to talk about it was something that I think is very powerful. So again, we don't have to relive it. We don't have to rehash it. Sometimes we don't even remember exactly what it was that happened, but being able to just, hey, this happened and it's a part of my past. It's a part of what influenced some of my life decisions, but it doesn't define me.
Mhm.
I think being able to say it was so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is really, I've noticed too, there's a lot of power in someone reflecting it to you.
Yeah.
And I can see what you're saying about having the struggle with sharing it. And I've seen that in a few other people as I've walked alongside them through trauma, where they almost needed somebody else outside to name what it was. And it's like a sense of relief that was provided more, I just imagine in my mind from the standpoint of like, I'm not crazy. Like
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
naming that this is what happened,
Mhm.
and having somebody else do that for you or alongside you. I think it is a helpful piece
Absolutely.
process for
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah. I had read a book called The Courage to Heal. That was one of my first things that I did. And some of the points that they made in that book, I remember saying, wow, okay, I'm not crazy. And I wasn't alone. And then having that therapist to talk through with these things that I was learning was so powerful. Because again, just to your point, I think we can feel so alone and so shamed with things that it's not ours to carry. It was never ours to carry, but here we are carrying it. So to really have that reflection, and in my work we do a lot of reflection activities um with those big traumas. Those are some things that I focus on, but I also focus on what I call the little traumas. And the only difference that I say between the big traumas and little traumas, I think they're both equally as impactful. But with those bigger things that happen, sometimes we can pinpoint it more easily because of what it was. The littler ones, maybe it's a critical parent, a critical teacher, maybe it's bullying with your peers. And all of those things, I think, creates our own inner critic and our own self-doubts that come out. And because it wasn't as big as these others, maybe we're not remembering it, but it's still impacting, and I call it echoing in our life now.
Mhm.
So it's all of that is important. And that's where I think having somebody to kind of reflect back on it is so important because we're just living. There's a beautiful saying, self-limiting beliefs are so hard to identify because they feel like something that just is. So by having that partnership or that whether it's coaching, whether it's therapy, to really reflect on it and then say, okay, wow, I did beat myself up over this, or I did fill in the blank with anything that we tend to do. I think it can be very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I like calling them type A and type B traumas. And A is like the absence of something that should have been there.
Mm,
So if you have a parent that's kind of emotionally or even physically absent, right? It creates a trauma in your life in one way. And then the B traumas are like bad things that happen,
mm,
right? And
mhm,
I've found from my own experience, I was molested as a child, and
Mhm.
interestingly enough, having a mother that was emotionally absent, which would be the
Mhm.
A versus the B, I found more challenging to move past. It's more like, I guess, insidious in the way that it's like sprinkled into the entirety of my life because
Yeah,
it's just not having a mom be there in the way that I needed.
right. Right.
So it is really interesting because typically, as a society from the outside looking in, we're going to label B traumas or big traumas as like the terrible thing. And not, of course, they are terrible, but I have found personally those A traumas for me are harder to work through.
Yeah, very even more impactful
Hmm.
than the B traumas or the big traumas. And right, that's it's not only something that may have happened, but it's something that may not have happened.
Yeah.
We needed that hug, we needed that support, we needed that encouragement, and when it's not there, and can be harder to identify because of that. So yeah, I definitely feel like those traumas, whether they be big, little, AB, it's the impact that we're still carrying. That's what I work with.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it often takes many different relationships with other people and them being the type of relationships where you're exposed to their family and you're exposed to those family dynamics, right? Of friends or maybe someone that you're dating or something to start to see like, oh, like the way that my family worked wasn't like the same as this. And you start to think when, at least when you're little, everybody's family is doing the same thing.
Right.
You don't realize like there's all this stuff. And then I feel like it takes pulling back even more as you go into adulthood when you can start to like realize what was unhealthy and not.
Just normal, quote
Yeah.
unquote.
Yeah, quote unquote normal, because
Mhm.
you don't know and when you're just living in a world like that.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, outside of the therapy piece that really helped you process through all of those parts that you needed to, was there a particular way of dealing with this lasting impact that you've found helpful?
So I had a couple things. I actually did do a couple rounds of therapy. I believe that that's, the layer of the onion. Like, okay, we dealt with this and now we're good and you move forward. And then something happens where all of a sudden we're realizing, oh, there's a little bit more deep that has happened. One of the things that I had to do, and I did this in my 30s, was, and again, I did do this through a therapeutic format, but I didn't, I had never dealt with the stuff that mine started. It was a molestation as well at 3 years old, and then another time at 8. And um, that self-worth that got crushed basically at that time um, caused me to again repress and just act unconsciously. And I never dealt with those other years of the impact of the other stuff that happened. So continuing to do the therapy, continuing to do self-help books, and then really just talking with people. My second career also, I think, helped me to understand a whole other dynamic because it was the child welfare piece of things. So, and even my first career was hairdressing, and I have clients, a lot of times they say, "Oh, they are the therapist." And just hearing so many of stories from my clients, I had one gentleman who really had a traumatic childhood, but he excelled in sports. So even though his entire family life was completely chaos, his coaches and his best friends' dads would, okay, well, I'm going to take you to the game. If you can't get a ride there, you're going to come with us. So, kind of like what you said, getting exposed to other things, he was able to get exposed to, okay, this isn't normal. There is other things out there that are better. So, having all of those experiences with talking to people, and then again, moving into my child welfare world, seeing so much, I really, and the reason why my business is positive living coaching is because I don't want that stuff that's happened to define us. It doesn't define us. It's not our weight to carry. It's something that happened. But now, how can we shift our perspective and change, see all the strengths that we get from our lives and really embrace the positivity and enjoy the rest of our lives without carrying the weight of that past.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So would you say, like, who is your ideal client?
So my ideal client is somebody that has done some therapeutic work. I don't, again, because I'm not that licensed therapist, if all of a sudden they're like, oh, I just realized that all of this happened and I'm just first getting in touch with it, I'd want them to do therapy first. But so many of us do the therapy, so many of us do the work, but there's still something stuck there. Our inner critic is still there. Our self-doubt is still there. And maybe our lives seem fine. That I have that fine is never really means fine.
Yeah.
Um, but then they come across different things that all of a sudden their inner critic comes up. Oh, I can't do that because I could never do that. That's not for me. Well, why not? Yes, it is. We can do anything that we want to do. So if they've already processed some of the stuff that they need to process, but they're still feeling the weight, they're still feeling the inner critic, the self-doubt, the low self-worth, that's really one of the biggest things that I have overcome. Um, and so that's the ideal client, the one that's done some work, but still is, those echoes of the trauma are still impacting their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think? So if sometimes you're in that situation and it's hard to identify that that is what's going on. Do you have any good examples of maybe what someone might be experiencing to kind of shine a light on, like, hey, if you're having thoughts like this or experiences like this, the trauma might still be affecting you?
Yeah. And that's such a good point that goes back to my saying before, limiting beliefs are so hard to identify because we see them as something that just is.
Yeah.
So sometimes it is just, really kind of trying to get in touch with that. I truly believe we know. I truly believe in our own knowing, our inner knowing. And so, right now, if anyone's listening, they might say, oh, yeah, I do that, even though in their daily lives, they're not connected with it. If that's somebody listening, then I say, just have a call with me. If there's, somebody in their life that is, because like you said, our relationships, they really do reflect. If there's somebody in our life that is sharing it, that could be something. But the biggest thing that I think it is if they're not satisfied in their lives, if there's something that they're not happy with, if their behaviors, maybe they're, okay, well, I want to do better with my day, my schedule, my anything, but they find themselves just scrolling on social media for hours or numbing themselves. One of the things that I do see a lot is people become addicted. And though I'm not an addiction specialist, I would work with people to help them build their self-worth to know that they do deserve to get sober, to live that life. If they're in a relationship that really crushes their value, okay, well, again, I say this just because of my child welfare worlds where there was a lot of domestic violence. And actually, I heard somebody say the other day, toxic relationship instead of domestic violence, because domestic violence always seems like, oh, well, I've never been hit. Well, domestic violence isn't necessarily just physical. It can be emotional, and there's so many components to it. So if, pardon me, if they feel like they're in a toxic relationship, the person is not being lifted up, they're not being valued for who they are. And that is an uncomfortable feeling for them. That's somebody that I think is feeling those echoes of the childhood trauma, feeling the echoes of what they learned, and they're just not piecing it together. So
Yeah,
I'd say that's the biggest one, is when they're not satisfied with something
I love.
and maybe think, oh, that's just how it is. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That helped me reflect a lot on my own journey, and I would say that that's really accurate
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the calling to do some more work around this area.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for everything you've shared. I would love to help people connect with you so they can learn more about you and your program and the work that you do. Will you tell us where to find you?
Yes. So my website is positivelivingcoaching.com. If anyone wants to reach out to me personally, my email address is holly@positivelivingcoaching.com. And just if anyone's listening, I do spell my name Holli. So holly@positivelivingcoaching.com. And I am on Facebook and Instagram as well.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to put all of those links in the show notes as well so you can find it and click it there. Um, yeah, Holly, it's just been a pleasure getting to know you. You've got a beautiful spirit about you, and the work that you're doing for others in the world is really valuable. So thank you for being here and sharing with us. And I wish you a blessed day.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for all you do because the inner peace is just what we all should have.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank
I
you.
hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're feeling blessed by the content here, the number one way you can show me is by leaving me a written review of the show. I'd be forever grateful. Knowing that you're out there listening helps me know that I'm truly living out God's purpose in my life. The other thing you can do is take a screenshot of this episode, share it with a friend, or better yet, tag me on your Instagram stories. Remember, you are seen, known, and loved. May God richly bless you today. All my love, Erin Jean.